Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, 9 people have been arrested in connection with a gun attack in Tunis yesterday that saw 23 people killed. We have the latest on that developing story. Also on tonight's program, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now watered down his recent pre-election comments not to allow establishment of a Palestinian state. We have an update on the Prime Minister's changed words tonight on the program. Also on tonight's program, the EU ties lifting Russia's sanctions to full Ukraine peace accord. We have the decision whether the EU will lift those ties. This as Russia, China, Venezuela, and Angola snubbed an informal United Nations Security Council meeting on human rights as Crimea, as it reaches a year after Crimea was seized by Russia in the Black Sea. Also in D.C. news tonight, emails sought of nearly a dozen State Department workers under former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. We'll tell you who some of those people are tonight. And did Hillary Clinton not promise that her charity did not disclose those list of loners during the last election? Well, still hasn't happened yet. We'll tell you what's happened regarding that. All those stories and more, plus Corey Evans.
An advertiser on Craigslist turns out to be a baby killer who knows how to do a C-section. Ugh. The Pledge of Allegiance is read in Arabic at one public school? Oh man, this is definitely added to our continuing battle against globalism. The maker of Tesla is now calling their latest computer on wheels. But how computerized is it? And more importantly, will it ever show up at Target? I don't know. In lawsuits, we find out that you should be wary of arsenic if you go wine tasting. And Justin Bieber's latest run-in involves Emmy Rossum. Uh-oh. That's all coming up on your conservative news source. The Evan Miller Report starts now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Thursday, March the 19th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evans this evening in our Los Angeles bureau.
Ah, man, those clouds outside. I wish that some of them had a little rain for us, but at least on my weather app, it says, no rain for you.
Not a good thing. It keeps
No, not with the water restrictions coming up.
Keeps those damn government drought socialists whining and complaining about how much water we're wasting. Not.
Would you like some arsenic with that wine? Yeah, I'll talk about that in lawsuits later.
Yes, looking forward to that as always. Also on tonight's program, in tonight's D.C. news, the Attorney General vote is delayed due to a trafficking bill. We'll have more on that. And in tonight's Global Socialism, one Google exec says immigration changes would help the economy. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off in Tunis tonight, where new information has revealed that 9 people have been arrested in connection with a gun attack in that country that saw 23 people killed yesterday, including 20 foreign tourists. Tunisia's president said 4 of those arrested were directly linked to the attack and 5 had ties to the cell. The army will also be deployed into major cities, the president added. In another development today, the terrorist group Daesh said it was behind the attack on the Bardo Museum, using an audio message to praise the 2 nights of the Coptate. The message, posted on one of the official Twitter accounts known as to be a reliable source of Daesh propaganda, named the attackers as Abdel Zarakili al-Tunisi and Abdel Anis al-Tunisi. The statement described the attack as a blessed invasion of one of the dens of infidels and vice in Muslim Tunisia. One of the two gunmen involved in the Bardo Museum attack, named by Tunisian officials as Yande Labi, was reportedly known to authorities. Tunisia's Prime Minister Hayab Issy told RTL Radio that security services had flagged him up but were not aware of anything specific or of any links to any known militant groups. Labi and his accomplice, named as Hatim Kachawini, were killed as security forces stormed the museum. It was not immediately clear how the identities of the gunmen corresponded to the names given by the Danish jihadist groups, often giving their fighters noms d'journey. Tourists from Japan, Colombia, Australia, and the UK, and several other European countries were killed in the attack. More than 40 other people were injured. Stay with the Evan Miller Report on this continuing story as it develops on the Evan Miller Report. And moving on to Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now watered down a pre-election vow not to allow the establishment of a Palestinian state. In a U.S. TV interview, Mr. Netanyahu said he wanted a two-state solution, but said circumstances have to change. In an interview with the thugs at MSNBC, as we like to call them here on the Evan Miller Report, it was his first since winning a clear election victory earlier this week. As the campaign ended, Mr. Netanyahu had appealed to supporters by saying he would not allow a Palestinian state. But that view was tempered in today's interview, which he also denied accusations that another last-minute campaign pronouncement amounted to racism. I don't want a one-state solution. I want a sustainable, peaceful two-state solution. But for that, circumstances have to change, Mr. Netanyahu told MSNBC. He continued to say, I never changed my speech in Bar Ilan University 6 years ago, calling for a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. What has changed is the reality, he said. Mr. Netanyahu's campaign comments in a speech he made to the U.S. Congress earlier this month were widely seen to have soured relations between Israel and the Obama administration, according to some. However, on Thursday, the White House said President Obama had called Mr. Netanyahu to congratulate him on his victory. In his interview, Mr. Netanyahu cited a sticking point, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas's refusal to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. He also repeated frequent criticism of Mr. Abbas's decision to form a unity government with militant Islamic group Hamas, which is sworn to Israel's destruction, and he criticized the idea that Israel might hand over territory to the Palestinians at the current time. Every territory that is vacated in the Middle East is taken up by Islamic forces, Mr. Netanyahu said. And to read that full interview, we will post the link to that story on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, later this evening for your viewing pleasure. Moving on to Nigeria, where dozens of women who were forced to marry Boko Haram fighters were reportedly slaughtered by their husbands before a battle with troops in the northeast town of Bama, multiple witnesses said Thursday. 5 witnesses who recounted the massacres to the AFP news agency said the Islamic militants feared they would be killed by advancing soldiers or separated from their wives when they fled the town. They killed the woman to prevent them from subsequently marrying soldiers or other so-called non-believers, they added. The terrorists said they would not allow their wives to be married to infidels, said Sharif Barkur, 39, a mother of 3. Nigeria's military, along with forces from neighboring Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, have claimed huge victories over the insurgents in recent weeks, but defenseless civilians still face serious threats. According to Bakur's account, which was supported by others, Boko Haram fighters received word of a military assault on Barma, formerly an Islamic stronghold in Borno State. The insurgents then decided to flee to the nearby town of Gaswa before the troops' arrival, but first decided to kill their wives so no one will remarry them, she said. Bakra's husband was killed by the insurgents 4 months ago, but she was spared from a forced marriage because she was visibly pregnant. Boko Haram forcibly married scores of women in Barma after seizing it back in September. Nigeria's military announced the recapture of the town this past Monday. Over to Iraq now, where Baghdad is sending a payment of $412 million to Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region, a sign that a budget deal between the two sides is still on track, according to the finance minister speaking today. He said, quote, pardon me, a decision has been taken by the government and the finance ministry to send a payment worth 490 billion Iraqi dinars, or as we stated, 412 million US dollars, to the KRG, or Kurdish Regional Government, to cover actual expenses for February. Hashir Kabir told the AFP news agency the payment includes funding for Kurdish security forces who are battling the Danish group that overran large areas north and west of Baghdad last year, Zaviri said. Another payment will follow at the end of March. Over to the EU now, where EU leaders agreed on Thursday to link lifting economic sanctions on Russia to full implementation of a Ukrainian ceasefire agreement, European Council President Donald Tusk announced today. EU leaders at a summit meeting in Brussels did not formally agree to extend the sanctions due to expire in July unless renewed, but the links to the Minsk agreement effectively extend sanctions until the end of the year because the accord sets a number of deadlines for the end of 2015. The duration of economic sanctions will be clearly linked to a full implementation of the Minsk agreement, Tusk told a news conference today. He continued to say, we have to maintain our sanctions until the Minsk agreement is fully implemented. Meanwhile, Russia, China, Venezuela, and Angola snubbed an informal United Nations Security Council meeting today on human rights a year after Crimea was seized by Russia in the Black Sea. Russia's parliament approved the annexation of Crimea, of course, back on March the 21st of last year, after Russian forces took control of the peninsula, which is home to the Russia's Black Sea Fleet, and residents backed joining the Russian Federation in a referendum. UN mission spokesperson Alexei Zaitov said, quote, we consider this event counterproductive and provocative. It doesn't fall within the purview of the UN Security Council. That came from the Russian UN mission spokesman Alexei Zenstov. A deadlocked 15-member Security Council has held more than 30 meetings on Ukraine since the seizure of Crimea. Fighting between Russia-backed separatist rebels and the Ukrainian government troops in eastern Ukraine has killed more than 6,000 people and displaced more than 1 million, according to a UN report. And finally, to wrap up our news regarding Russia tonight, the United States oil and gas giant ExxonMobil is demanding millions of dollars of euros in back taxes from Moscow that it believes it overpaid on a project in Russia's Far East, according to a newspaper reporting yesterday. ExxonMobil chief executive Rex Tillerson was in Moscow this past Wednesday for a closed-door meeting with Energy Minister Alexander Novak, a spokesman for the minister told AFP news agency. The Kosmistan Daily reported Tillerson was in town to contest taxes paid on the Shikhlin 1 project in the Far East operated by ExxonMobil, which owns 30% of the operation. The American company has allegedly been paying 35% of its profit to Moscow despite the state reducing taxes to 20% back in 2009. The newspaper said that while Exxon had not insisted on the issue in past years, Western sanctions over Russia's role in the Ukraine crisis had seen the company change tactics and threaten to file a complaint against Moscow at the International Court of Arbitration in Stockholm. Sources quoted by the respected daily said the amount involved was up to 150 million euros, which is the equivalent of 160 million US dollars. Over to Greece now, where the communist Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras urged European leaders at a summit today to help him tackle a looming cash crunch, despite warnings from Germany that he should expect no breakthrough. As fears mounted of a Greek exit from the euro and tensions climbed between Athens and its creditors over its huge bailout, Tsipras told his counterparts Greece faced a humanitarian crisis. He addressed the full meeting of 28 leaders ahead of special sidelines talks after the summit with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President Francis Hollande, and top EU officials. European alarm that Tsipras, a new hardline left government and communist government, will not stick to a planned austerity reforms increased after the Greek Parliament adopted a crisis bill aimed at helping the poor on Wednesday. At the summit, Alexis Tsipras said it was contradictory that Europe accepts that there was a humanitarian crisis in Greece, while at the same time accusing Greece of unilateral action when it votes for measures to deal with it. According to a government statement out of Athens, Tsipras accused Greece's creditors in the EU, the IMF, and the ECB of holding up red cards, saying this was a holding back process on completing Greece's €240 billion bailout by June, as agreed last month. And of course, Corey Evan will have more market reaction in the business report later on. The European Union also today sharply criticized China's new cybersecurity rules, joining a global effort to challenge measures that the US and EU companies say could force them out of the Chinese market altogether. Calling them a tremendous barrier for foreign companies competing in the information technology sector, the European Commission said the rules proposed late last year went far beyond other security standards around the world. China continues to consider that only Chinese-developed information security technology is regarded as safe and applies a concept of national security far beyond normal international practice. The EU executive said in its annual report on trade barriers. China's banking regulator had adopted new standards requiring tech products to be secure and controllable for use in the financial sector. Those that have not been developed in China must be registered with the government, putting at risk corporate secrets, secure emails, and encrypted data. And finally, once a source of irritation for the U.S., France has nudged aside Britain to become the U.S.'s military key European partner. The growing ties between the two militaries were on display this month when France's top military officer, General Henri de Villers, hosted his U.S. counterpart, General Martin Dempsey, aboard France's aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, the French flagship, which arrived in the Gulf back in February to take part in the U.S.-led airstrikes on the Danish terrorist group, is operating under U.S. command, a first for French naval forces. During the carrier's mission, U.S. F-18 fighter jets have touched down on the deck of the de Gaulle, and French Rafale fighters have also visited American vessels. On the deck of the carrier, the acrimony that plagued U.S.-French relations 12 years ago over the American invasion of Iraq seemed like a distant memory. The new relationship is reflected in the warm rapport between the two top generals, Dempsey and de Villers, who have forged an unmistakable bond, according to Dempsey's spokesman, Colonel Ed Thomas. That trust has influenced French and American officers many levels down, he said. U.S. commanders were also grateful when France took the lead in military operations against Danish extremists in the Sahel region in Africa, with U.S. forces providing logistical support and drones to back up the effort. And that is a wrap on tonight's international headlines. Now it's time to send it over to Corey Evan, and he has tonight's national news.
Has been given a glimpse of his computer contents, or the jurors in the trial of the Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev have been given a glimpse of his computer contents, the extremist material such as Inspire magazine. An FBI computer forensics expert began testifying Thursday about materials from Tsarnaev's computer, according to Fox News. One file is called Complete Inspire. In the indictment, prosecutors alleged he had downloaded a copy of Inspire that included instructions on how to build bombs with pressure cookers, the kind of device used in the marathon bombing. During opening statements, a prosecutor cited Inspire as one way Tsarnaev and his older brother, Tamerlan, became radicalized. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev could face the death penalty if convicted. Tamerlan died after a gunfight with police, as you know, and as you know, he faces the death penalty if convicted, Mr. Tsarnaev does. Robert Durst appeared to be prepared for life on the lam when FBI agents arrested him in New Orleans, according to CNN. The millionaire heir, according to court documents, had more than $40,000 in cash with him and a neck-to-head latex mask to alter his appearance. The new details about Durst, who's been charged with first-degree murder, emerged Wednesday in court documents supporting a search warrant for his Houston home. It's the latest twist in a whirlwind week for Durst, the subject of HBO's true crime documentary The Jinx. He's gone from a man battling suspicions that he killed 3 people to a frail 71-year-old on suicide watch. Durst, whose real estate developer family is among New York's wealthiest, has a net worth of about $100 million and sums of money from various bank accounts, including daily withdrawals of $9,000 over 35 days since October. The court document said he's being held on drug and weapons charges in Louisiana as he awaits extradition to L.A. to face charges in the 2000 killing of his close friend. It's not the first time he's been accused of murder. He admitted to killing and dismembering his neighbor in an 2003 trial, but he was acquitted after arguing he acted in self-defense. So it's going to be a wonder how he defends himself on this latest arrest. And a 26-year-old pregnant woman in Colorado, spotting a Craigslist ad for baby clothes, drove to the home of the woman who placed the ad. This from the Washington Post. When the pregnant woman arrived on Wednesday, she was beaten and stabbed by the 34-year-old woman who lives there, police said. The attacker then did something nearly unimaginable, and I will give you a fair warning right now, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm about to tell you is very gruesome, so if you're eating, you might want to put down whatever you're eating and back away from your lunch.
Hide the children.
She removed the fetus from her victim's body, according to police in Longmont, Colorado. Yeah, it's that bad. Longmont Police Commander Jeff Satter identified the suspect on Thursday morning as Dynell Lane. While the victim was left on the floor with a stab wound in her abdomen, Lane took the fetus to the hospital. The baby has since died, unfortunately. Lane is in police custody at Boulder County Jail, according to booking records. She's being held on $2 million bond, and formal charges are scheduled to be filed next week, the Denver Post reported. Prosecutors are weighing what to charge Lane, including whether they can bring murder charges, which we here at the Evan Miller Report say, of course you can. Autopsy will be reported Friday, and Lane's public defender asked that an expert witness for the defense be present for it, the Denver Post reported. Investigators have a pretty good idea of the motivation of the suspect, Satter told the Washington Post in the Thursday morning phone call. Although Satter declined to discuss details, he said, quote, "It would be something everybody would think." The victim was able to call 911 after she was attacked, Satter said, leading the police to her location in Longmont, about 15 miles from Boulder and 35 miles from Denver. As responding officers approached Lane's house, they could hear a female calling for help inside the home, according to a statement from Longmont police. In an audio recording of the victim's 911 call, released to reporters late Thursday morning local time, the victim says her attacker stabbed her in the stomach with a knife and a broken glass as she was getting ready to leave the house. The dispatcher kept the victim on the phone for about 6 minutes until officers arrived at the scene, asking her to press a towel or any... Don't go to sleep, the dispatcher repeatedly tells the victim, whom police are not identifying. The victim was 7 months pregnant, and she's expected to recover following surgery and is alert, answering questions, and is with her family, Satter said in an emailed statement on Thursday. So, at least the mother will survive, but the fact that this woman killed a 7-month-old pregnant woman's baby who wasn't even born, didn't even give her a chance at life, or him, truly
Seriously.
Just shocking.
It is. It seriously is shocking. And it really shows to tell you, Corey Evan, when you have a change in social policy by the likes of this communist government that we have in place, such as the Obama administration and Eric Holder in the Justice Department, no wonder the mentally ill are going crazy.
Yeah, and anyone who stabs and kills a baby like that, I think should get the death penalty right away. But knowing our government, they'll probably just give her life imprisonment on our dime. So we have to pay for her killing this baby.
Corey Evan, as impassioned as ever. Wow.
Yes.
It's just a shocking story.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm sure it's something that the royal family would never want to have happen. But on a totally different note, the Prince of Wales has met U.S. President Obama at the White House during his visit to the country. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall met Mr. Obama and VP Joe Biden at the Oval Office. The president told the prince, according to BBC, that the royal family was fondly regarded by the American people. The prince also visited an adult education school and took part in 10-pin bowling during this part of the 4-day goodwill tour. Sounds a bit like Obama's campaign years. Any rate, Mr. Obama and the prince last met 4 years ago when he flew to the U.S. a few days after the wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Mr. Obama told the prince it was fair to say that the American people are quite fond of the royal family. At least we here at the Evan Miller Report are. The president continued with the lighthearted comment like this. They like them much better than they like their own politicians.
Well, that's a statement, ladies and gentlemen, I can actually agree with the president on for once. And, Mr. President, your company is presently included in those comments.
And on that note, I think it's time we go to break. But when we come back, Tesla's new Model S is apparently more mobile than the MacBook and smarter. Target? I don't know, but the lawyers have. In today's lawsuits across America, the docket also dares to ask you if you want to stick with that one, as I mentioned earlier. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, for those of you fangirls and fanboys, if there's anyone out there, will produce and star in the Fraggle Rock movie. Jay, what you got in DC news?
Thank you very much, Corey. Emails are being sought of nearly a dozen U.S. State Department workers. We'll tell you who they might be. Also tonight, the Attorney General vote for Loretta Lynch is delayed as a human trafficking bill stalls the vote in the Senate.
No.
Also, officials say Rand Paul has not filed paperwork to run for president, and in Louisiana, they're scrambling to find money to stage a primary election next year for Governor Bobby Jindal to go into the presidential election. We'll have all those stories and more when we return on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, after this break. You're listening to SHR Media.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
St. Jude is leading the way childhood cancer is treated and defeated in communities across America.
And no family receives a bill from St. Jude, not for treatment, travel, housing, or food.
So parents at St. Jude can focus on what matters most, helping their child live.
Give thanks.
Give thanks.
Give thanks for the healthy kids in your life and give to those who are not. Go to stjude.org or shop wherever you see the St. Jude logo.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome back to the Evan Miller Report here on the SHR Media Networks. Now time for the latest on the biz and the close at the New York Stock Exchange today. Here's Corey Evan with the bell.
There's that wonderful bell, but things aren't looking so wonderful on Wall Street. The Dow is down 170 points at 17,959. This time I got it right. It's definitely down, folks. The S&P 500 is also down by 10 at 2,089, but the NASDAQ is going against the trend, again, up 9 points at 4992. The number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits rose marginally last week, indicating the labor market remained on solid footing despite slowing economic growth. Other data on Thursday showed manufacturing activity in the Atlantic slowed for a fourth straight month in March, hitting its lowest level in more than a year, while a gauge of future economic activity rose slightly in February. Growth has slowed in the first quarter. Strong dollar, weaker overseas economies, and now settled labor dispute at West Coast ports. These are mostly temporary factors that should fade by the second quarter. The Fed Reserve on Wednesday acknowledged the moderation in growth, but maintained its upbeat view of the jobs market as it signaled it was nearing an interest rate increase by dropping the reference to being paid from the central bank's so-called forward rate guidance. Initial claims for state unemployment benefits increased 1,000 to a seasonally adjusted 291,000 for the week ended March 14th. That's according to the department. The increase was broadly in line with economists' expectations, of course. The U.S. account deficit widened sharply in the fourth quarter and was the largest since 2012 as exports and the primary income surplus fell. The Commerce Department said to Reuters on Thursday the current account gap, which measures the flow of goods, services, and investments in and out of the country, increased to $113.5 billion from a revised $98.9 billion deficit in the third quarter. That's the largest shortfall since economists polled by Reuters had forecast the deficit widening to $103.2 billion from the previously reported $100.3 billion shortfall in the July to September quarter. The current account deficit represented 2.6% of GDP, the highest since the fourth quarter of 2012, from 2.2% in the third quarter. For all of 2014, the gap as a percentage of GDP was unchanged at 2.4%. Next up from Business etc.com, Target has agreed to the terms of a proposed settlement which mandates the retailer to pay $10 million in damages to victims of a 2013 data breach as per court documents filed in Minnesota. The settlement, which currently is awaiting court approval, could entitle each victim of the data breach to up to $10,000 in damages. Target is expected to deposit the settlement amount into an interest-bearing escrow account. Court documents indicate that if all goes well and the hearing on the case results in a court approval, the company has plans to process and settle claims online through a dedicated website. Those affected by the breach will be asked to provide reasonable documentation proving their loss which occurred during the incident, including up to 2 hours of lost time for each type of loss documented. The lost time will be valued at $10 an hour. And in a move that demonstrates how the mechanical and electronic worlds are converging, Tesla Motors plans to update many of its Model S functions that include automatic braking when the vehicle senses a pending collision, a partial autopilot system, and even a robotic parking program that will tuck a car into its garage while its owner watches from the porch. With the exception of robotic parking, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Acura, and other luxury brands already have cars with these options, but these features were built into the cars before they were bought. Tesla plans to remotely add substantial functions to cars that it's already sold. The autopilot safety features are available to the Model S with the hardware that started being built into cars. Since the invention of the automobile more than a century ago, consumers were pretty much stuck with the car they purchased. They could make some changes in tires, tuning, suspension, and an amped up sound system, but that was it until Tesla CEO Elon Musk came into the picture. He may be overturning conventions, as noted in this, and analysts agreed, saying that looks at the vehicle as an electronic device rather than a machine. So how about that, Jay? Looking at the Tesla, it's looking like they're ready to tack on just about anything, including the kitchen sink.
Wow, sounds a lot like the DeLorean out of Back to the Future. Next thing you know, we'll have automatic coffee popping out of the cup holders.
Yes, I know. That would be great for some people. I'd prefer, on the other hand, hot chocolate. But at any rate, that's all I have in business for today. Hey, Jason Miller, great news.
What's that?
Monica Lewinsky has turned her fight against cyberbullying into...
Oh, bummer. We lost Corey Evan there. Hopefully we get him back in here in just a second. Do we have you back, Corey?
Yeah, I was just telling you that Monica Lewinsky has turned her fight against cyberbullying into a TED Talk. She delivered it just today.
Who cares? Let's move on to the next story. Congress has subpoenaed the emails of close to a dozen people who worked in the State Department for Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. The chairman of the U.S. House Committee investigating the 2012 Benghazi attacks said on Thursday. Representative Trey Gowdy, chairman of the Benghazi Select Committee, told Reuters and ITN these included aides to Clinton and perhaps aides to aides. He continued to say, quote, "We sent a subpoena to the State Department for emails from a number of individuals within the State Department, other than Secretary Clinton." A New York Times report this month that Clinton had used a personal email account for government business while the chief U.S. diplomat from 2009 to 2013 has reinvigorated the committee's investigation into the September 11, 2012 attacks in Benghazi that killed U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans. Clinton, the frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016, though yet formally declare her candidacy, has come under scrutiny from Republicans who accuse her State Department of failing to protect diplomatic personnel. And remember back in 2008 when Hillary Clinton promised now President Obama, President Obama, that there would be no mystery about who was giving money to her family's globe circling charities? She made a pledge to publish all the donors on an annual basis to ease concerns that as Secretary of State she could be vulnerable to accusations of foreign influence. At the outset, the Clinton Foundation did indeed publish what they said was a complete list of names of more than 200,000 donors and has continued to update it. But in a breach of the pledge, the charity's flagship health program, which spends more than all the other foundation initiatives put together, stopped making the annual disclosure back in 2010, according to Reuters and ITN. In response to questions from Reuters and ITN, officials at the Clinton Health Access Initiative and the foundation confirmed no complete list of donors to the Clinton charities has been published since the year 2010. The organization was spun off as a separate legal entity that year, but officials acknowledge it still remains subject to the same disclosure agreement as the foundation. The finding could renew scrutiny of Clinton's promises of transparency as she prepares, as we stated earlier, to launch her run for the White House in 2016. Over to some real D.C. news tonight. A Senate stalemate over legislation to combat human trafficking deepened on Thursday, almost certainly delaying a confirmation vote on the president's attorney general nominee, Loretta Lynch, until mid-April. Senate Majority Leader and BS artist Mitch McConnell had planned to vote on Lynch's long-delayed nomination this week, but it was put off when bipartisan support for the trafficking bill collapsed in a partisan spat over abortion. He said he wanted to finish the trafficking bill first. That goal looked farther off than ever today as competing proposals were advanced to break the impasse and both quickly rejected by partisans on either side, according to some. I'm kind of devoid of additional ideas right now, Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas remarked Thursday afternoon after his compromise proposal had been dismissed by Democrats. He in turn shot down a competing plan from moderate Senator Susan Collins from Maine and Heidi Heitkamp from North Dakota. Together, the events hardened the impasse on the anti-trafficking bill. The legislation had looked primed for easy passage until last week when Democrats said they discovered language in the bill barring money in a victim's fund from being used to pay for abortions. The outlook for the bill now looks poor, although senators of both parties still insist they want to find a way for it to pass. At the same time, Lynch now looks like she's in for an even lengthier wait after being nominated last fall. The Senate plans to turn next week to the budget, after which Congress will be on a 2-week recess. Back to presidential politics for a moment. The U.S. Federal Election Commission said on Thursday that Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky has not officially filed paperwork to become a candidate for president in 2016. The FEC's comments came after CNBC reported that Paul had filed such documents. The FEC spokeswoman said, quote, "We do not have a filing indicating Rand Paul is running." A spokesperson for Paul also said the senator had not filed anything for the FEC. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, they are scrambling to find the money to stage a primary election next year after Governor Bobby Jindal, a potential presidential candidate, did not provide funding in his annual budget. Jindal's spending plan unveiled earlier this month would impose steep spending cuts to close a projected $1.6 billion shortfall brought on by plunging oil revenues. Among the items on the chopping block, the $3.5 million needed to conduct the state's presidential primary. It would be the first time in decades that Louisiana has not set aside money for a primary election, said Meg Casper for the state agency that conducts elections. "We've never had a scheduled election not included in the budget," said Casper, Louisiana Secretary of State Tom Snyder. "The primary is not in peril," said Jindal's budget office, though. State officials will work with the legislature to come up with the money needed to stage the March 5th, 2016 election, said Megan Parmarsh, a spokeswoman for the Louisiana Division of Administration. "We are going to work with them to make sure this doesn't happen," she said. The decision to eliminate funding for the primary did not come from Jindal's office, as each state agency was given latitude to find cuts of their own. Meanwhile, lawmakers in the Republican-controlled legislature have not yet decided how to proceed, said Chris Keene, a staffer on the House of Representatives Appropriations Committee. If the state does go ahead with its primary tentatively scheduled for next year, the results could prove disappointing for Jindal, as seen his popularity plummet in the state. 2 recent polls found that nearly 2/3 of voters in the state disapprove of his job as governor. All right, folks, it's time for that little segment in the program that we love to call, Corey Evans,
Global Socialism.
All right, and we start off tonight's Global Socialism with the executive chairman of Google urging Congress yesterday to increase the number of high-skilled work visas made available to workers and to deal with other immigration issues. Eric Schmidt was speaking at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. Schmidt said he believes the U.S. is better off having more immigration, not less, but he is partially focused on allowing more immigrants into the U.S. with specialized technical skills. In the long list of stupid policies of the U.S. government, he said, "I think our attitude toward immigration has gotten clear the top." Schmidt said in answering a question about the biggest policy change he would like to see the federal government make. He continued to say, quote, "We take very, very smart people, bring them into the country, give them a diploma, and then kick them out, where they go to create companies that compete with us," Schmidt said. brilliant strategy. And I bet that last comment was a bit of sarcasm. Schmidt said that...
Very snarky.
Yeah, indeed, Corey Evan. Schmidt said that increasing the number of H-1B visas, a program that's separate from the student visa program, would grow the economy because immigrants will go on to become lawful permanent residents and start their own businesses and hire workers. He also said he believes a majority of lawmakers from both parties agree on this point, which is why they should deal with other aspects of immigration reform separately. So what's this mean in code speak, ladies and gentlemen? It means that Eric Schmidt is for amnesty, which Republicans believe is comprehensive immigration reform. What a bunch of load of global socialism BS. That's in my opinion.
Absolutely.
All right, time to move on to Alabama, where the American Civil Liberties Union on Wednesday asked a federal judge to block an Alabama law that allows a fetus to be represented in court when a minor is seeking judicial permission for an abortion. While abortion opponents have rolled out a variety of new restrictions on abortion in recent years, including new requirements on clinics and doctors, ACLU staff attorney Andrew Beck said that the Alabama law was unique. This particular law is one of a kind, Beck was quoted as saying. Alabama minors must have permission from their parents or a judge to have an abortion. Alabama legislators in 2014 changed the judicial permission process to allow a judge at his or her discretion to appoint a guardian ad litem for the interest of the unborn child. The law also requires the local district attorneys to be notified of the hearing and can question the minor and then call witnesses. U.S. Magistrate Judge Susan Russ Walker heard arguments on the ACLU request for a preliminary injunction blocking the law and a state request to dismiss the lawsuit. State lawyers argued the law provides options to the judge to obtain information about a minor's maternity level, while the ACLU argued the law forces teens to go through a trial to obtain an abortion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I like to say, that's deeming on parental rights. When the child is below 18 years of age and they're between the ages of 14 and 17, the child cannot think for his or herself. Why do you think the adult age in the United States is 18 years old? That's all I have to say on this subject. And now I send it over to my colleague, Corey Evan, and he has more on certain people in Texas putting up signs exclusively for white people. Tell us more, Corey.
Yes, this one. Employees at several Austin, Texas, have found stickers saying exclusively for white people placed on their windows, sparking an investigation into their origin and condemnation from the mayor. Mr. Steve Adler said the stickers discovered Wednesday morning were an appalling and offensive display of ignorance in our city. The stickers also say maximum of 5 colored customers, colored BOH staff accepted, apparently referring to the back-of-house operations at a restaurant. They featured a City of Austin logo and claimed to be sponsored by the City of Austin. Austin's one of the fastest-growing cities in the U.S. and is confronting increasing questions about economic and racial segregation as real estate prices skyrocket around its urban core. Raul Alvarez, board president for the East Austin Conservancy, said the stickers are likely in response to gentrification east side. And get this, before we go into lawsuits, in New York State, a high school in the Hudson Valley are apologizing for having the Pledge of Allegiance recited in Arabic. And social media platforms are flooded with comments of both support and opposition. And I'm going to go ahead and send Jay this one to read up. And after he expresses his disgust about it on a YouTube video, he'll post it up on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. So, is no school safe from the crazy Arabs? When will people learn to just look beyond skin color and dollar signs? Because those two seem to go hand in hand these days. And where is my... Oh, wherever it is, remind me to use decaf. And stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evan.
Yeah. Sit. We got a lot to talk about. A proposed class action suit alleges customers from a serious health threat from dozens of California wineries due to extremely elevated levels of poison, including inorganic arsenic, attorneys announced today, according to CBS LA. The complaint filed in LA Superior Court alleges 28 brands such as Sutter Home, Charles Shaw, and Behringer are violating producing, marketing, and selling arsenic-contaminated wine and failing to warn customers about the potential danger. Plaintiff's Doris Charles...
Not good. Now the
not good at
people
all.
Can't get drunk.
Yeah, actually, that's not such a bad thing when you think of it. But, at any rate, plaintiffs Doris Charles, Alvin Peltier, no relation to Jason Miller, of course, and Jennifer Peltier alleged that in some cases the wineries produce and market wines that contain up to 500% or more than what is considered the maximal acceptable safe daily intake limit. Yeah, the plaintiffs are seeking unspecified damages and a court order directing the wineries to correct the alleged poor practices. So we'll have to see how they do on that one. And the ACLU has settled its federal lawsuit against a DeKalb County, Georgia judge and Judicial Correction Services, Inc., claiming the court and private companies' debt collection practices led to poor people being jailed because they couldn't pay. JCS is the same company that's faced multiple lawsuits in Alabama over similar issues. At one point, JCS had contracts to provide probation services for about 100 of Alabama's roughly 250 cities. The ACLU said in a press release issued Thursday morning that the Georgia settlement includes a policy that could serve as a across the country. Changes include adoption of a bench card that provides judges instructions to avoid sending people to jail because they owe court fines and are unable to pay. Training and guidance to the DeKalb, I can't talk today. The DeKalb County Recorder's court personnel involved in misdemeanor probation on probationers' right to counsel and revocation proceedings, and revision of forms to let people charged with probation violations know of their right to court-appointed counsel and probation revocation proceedings and their right to request a waiver of any public defender fees they can't afford. DeKalb County, the Recorder Court Judge, and JCS are also paying $70,000 to Kevin Thompson and to the ACLU to cover court costs. Hefty fines, everybody. And, of course, more ways to tell the judges exactly how to do their job, even though they've been doing their job just the same way for the longest time. Don't tell the judge how to judge. He knows how to judge.
The jury's still out on that one, Corey Evan.
Well, if they're Judge Judy, they know what they're doing. But anyway, that is lawsuits for today. I declare today's suits case dismissed. And on to entertainment.
Yes, go ahead.
Justin Bieber is nothing more than a punk kid on the block to Emmy Rossum, who's her new neighbor will definitely be her last. According to TMZ, Emmy was on Sway in the Morning on SiriusXM this week and said she went out of her way to welcome Justin to her Beverly Hills hood when he moved in last month, but ran into a wall of bodyguards. She says Bieber eventually showed up, but was bawling so hard that, well, you gotta see her describe it. As for getting any future invites to JB's legendary Ragers, Emmy's not concerned, so... Of course, anyone who lives near Justin Bieber, I feel sorry for you. And there's going to be a
insurance policy out for all the eggs they might throw at their house.
Exactly. And there's going to be a familiar new face down at Fraggle Rock. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is set to produce and star in a new movie based on the beloved Jim Henson series, according to NBC's Today Show. Quote, the first screen personas I ever loved were Henson creations, first on Sesame Street and then on Fraggle Rock, the 34-year-old actor told Variety in a statement. Fraggle Rock in its original incarnation ran from 83 to 87 and followed the adventures of a society of cave-dwelling characters. It's not Gordon-Levitt's first time working with Vocabulary Lesson on Sesame Street in 2013 and appeared on Lady Gaga and the Muppets Holiday Spectacular later that year. Yeah, I know. Pulling stuff from the Today Show. I rarely do that, but when it comes up on my screen, in entertainment at least, it's worth noting.
Matt Lauer can still suck it, though.
Yes, unfortunately. And the day that his contract is up, we'll be saying, ding dong, the witch is dead.
Ding dong, Lauer's dead. Forget it.
I thought he was a witch.
Oh, no. He's a word that I can say.
I know. Right, that's what I've got in entertainment for you today. I hope to entertain you again tomorrow. Till then, I send it back to you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Corey. Thank you very much indeed. And a reminder of our top story tonight. 22 people have been killed in Tunis. This as the Danish terrorist group admits responsibility for that terrorist attack. Stay with the Evan Miller Report for the latest on this developing story, and more of our stories. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. And on that note, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Thursday, March the 19th, 2015. Coming up next, the weather with the Met Office is Louise Lear in the United States for our U.S. listeners. After that, the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClinton. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. For all of us, SHR Media, we thank you for listening, and we hope you'll tune in again tomorrow. Good night.
Good night, everybody. The weather is next.
Hello there. Rain to come for both the west and the east coast of North America over the next 24 hours. Quite a lot of cloud on the satellite picture. One mass moving way further north and east, and that's going to produce some rain. Another pushing into the Pacific Northwest, and that will produce some fairly persistent rain across British Columbia and in particular to Vancouver. Further south of that, though, the rain not arriving until the California coastline, where they are desperate for it, unfortunately. Here, temperatures perhaps into the mid-20s. That's the high 70s in terms of Fahrenheit. But let's take a look at those rain features in a little more detail through Friday then. We could see as much as 100 to 200 millimetres of rainfall bombarding that Vancouver area. So some of it really quite intense. Yes, snow on the leading edge to the higher ground, and maybe a little bit of rain pushing into Oregon. But as I say, California will stay largely fine and dry. Looks as though we could see some wet snow for a time into New York. But it will then turn back to rain, that rain easing away, and behind it, slightly milder conditions. So it's a short, sharp shock, I suspect, to New York, things improving into the weekend. A few isolated showers further south. And in fact, New York will see those temperatures climb to 9 degrees. So we're not too concerned about that snow arriving on Friday. Cloudier conditions likely on Sunday. Elsewhere across the west coast, well, the rain will slowly ease to showers, but a fair amount of cloud looks likely even for the second half of the weekend.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.